Hi, welcome to Painting by Letters. My name is Hannes, and today we're going to talk about doing something fun and enjoying the materials that we end up using. So, I want mascots. I'm not really sure this is a sensible thing to want, but I want mascots for the channel. I want to think about doing some more fun stuff, I think, going forwards, and so I wanted mascots. And in a previous video, I was absolutely smitten with these little guys. We obviously prepared for Tabitha and Bob, as I called them, to become test models, and that'll still exist whenever I do pick up a new army or a new painting project, and there's 2 or 3 of those coming at some point. They will resurface. But until then, I wanted to do something fun with these little guys. I suppose it's a bit of a palette cleanser. Feels a bit ridiculous given that I know the next video is also going to be a palette cleanser, but never mind, it's how it's kind of fallen. I really enjoy their design. I really enjoy just how cute they look. I think that's going to be quite important to try and keep them still looking quite cute. So what do I really want to do? To be honest, I need to experiment with contrast paints. I have bought so many of these things. Usually, I'll be in Newcastle city centre, I'll be walking around, I'll be gonna get a coffee or something, and I'll walk past a nerdy shop and I'll pick up a contrast paint. And through this accidental method of accumulation, I've got about 20 of them, I think. So I want to start using them. I want to start experimenting with them. I've barely used them before. The next thing I want to do is experiment with basing. I have used Vallejo, Games Workshop, etc. basing products before. In a later video, I'm hoping to use some basing products from a different company as well. Those pastes, or those kind of texture paints, I think GW calls them, can have some really interesting effects. But I've always sort of shied away from the more traditional basing products, or basing products that are made out of more natural elements. As such, I'd really like to experiment with Geek Gaming Scenics. Look, it would be impossible to do this video without talking about the elephant in the room. So, as a bit of a behind the scenes, not that there's much behind the scenes really to see, I start planning videos about 6 weeks before they come out. So between me walking through the middle of Newcastle, finding some Geek Gaming Scenic stuff which I've been on the hunt for absolutely ever, painting the models, working everything out, filming all of the bits that I need, and then scripting and doing the sections with the notebook, Luke has obviously decided to step away, and the Geek Gaming YouTube channel, I suppose, is presently on an indefinite hiatus, it looks like, and he, as quite a bastion of our community, has left. I just wanted to say a couple of things really quickly before moving on to the rest of the video. Firstly, he said in his final video that the company would continue. I'm going to say this because of how valuable a person he's been for this community, but I think we should where possible support them. But if you don't care about that bit, I'll say this as well. These are the best products I've ever used of this kind. I've done some stuff outside of this video as well with them, and honestly, they're really, really, really good. So we should keep supporting them, as well as I think it's quite a nice thing to do for his legacy. This was a really weird cutaway, wasn't it? I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. I don't know how to end this bit. I hope you enjoy the rest of it. In the last video, we dry brushed all of the primed models in grey and then in white. So what we're going to do initially is we're going to take just some primary colours and we're going to apply them to the models just to sort of get an initial look. For the little, I really don't know what to call him, goblin, I've called him Green Boy in my notes. So for the little green boy, I used the Striking Scorpions contrast paint. It created a really nice coverage over the greys and whites, but in particularly those recesses, it just didn't really stain them at all. I don't know if that's expected. The pot and the warrior were both painted in metallics. I did use 2 different metallics through this process just to sort of give a little bit of visual difference, that kind of thing, but really the base coats here are just regular metallics with the stuff that I want the contrast to go over later left in that grey or white colour. And the little wizard was actually painted in 2 different colours. So I used Shylish purple in the lower half, that's kind of a bit of shading, and I used Volupus, I guess, again, GW paints, my god, named fucking awfully, on the top half. It just gave a nice bit of two-toned interest to that model, which I quite liked. Once the primary colours were down, I sat down with some secondary colours. Again, I'm sticking mostly to contrasts here. So firstly, Blood Angel's red for the mouth of the pot, that's kind of your gums and things like that. That one worked really, really nicely. I can see myself using this paint a lot. Then the fabric of the scrolls, the teeth on the pot and the bone of the green boy were painted in a white colour. I know that previously I'd had the 2 dry brush stages, but I just wanted to push that brightness just a little bit more. I also wanted to experiment with contrast over other colours, so I painted aEthermatic blue over the metallic as a bit of a stain. This created, I think, quite a nice effect in the end, although initially I really wasn't very happy with it. That colour in itself is actually quite light. It works a little bit more like a stain than some of the other contrasts that feel a bit more like acrylics. Still really like it though. It works really well, and obviously that is a colour that I will probably be returning to. I used snakebite leather over the handle of the pot. Not necessarily a decision that I think I'd do again. I'd probably go for a different metallic, but it does give a little bit of visual interest. I just feel like it sort of detracts the eye away from the mouth, which is really where it should be. I followed this up with some skeleton horde, specifically over any teeth or bone elements. So obviously in the pot we went over the teeth with this. I actually did about 2 coats over the teeth so that there were darker and lighter parts as well. The bone kind of blow stick thing, I don't know what they're actually called, over the green boy and the scrolls of the wizard as well. Works really nicely for paper, so I think that's one that I will be doing again, particularly if there's ever an army that I'm painting that might have, you know, small little bits of paper attached. aEthermatic green to follow this was used to provide a secondary interest colour over the warrior. This worked really, really nicely once it dried, although again I really wasn't happy with it first time round, but it does work really well. Over some of the straight metallics that I wanted to leave as metallic, I went over them in Black Legion, just to sort of see what that contrast would do. It's one of those kind of combinations I hear people talk about a lot. I also did this over the warrior's sword as well, which seemed to work really, really nicely, just giving that little bit of definition so that later on when I came back in a highlight stage it was much easier. Finally, I picked out a small amount of Dark Angel's green to shadow under the green boy really, so I was picking out lots of those darker areas. I've got to say that Dark Angel's green works much better in staining darker coloured models, so that's probably something to think about as well, that maybe the darker contrasts stain blacks and dark greys much easier than the lighter ones do. Something that I'll be thinking about as well going forwards. I was really enjoying this kind of process. So these contrasts are really quite interesting, I think. They do a lot of the heavy lifting for us. I'm not gonna say that I think they're the one and done product that I think at least they were sold as. But then I suppose I missed lots of that marketing stage. I just sort of came along to it a little bit later. Most of the people that I know who I'm friends with in real life who paint seem to look on them really negatively. I think that's a bit of a shame. I get that if you've spent years and years and years perfecting acrylic painting, they might seem like a bit of a weird choice. Why cut some of that off? However, someone like myself who doesn't necessarily have the steadiest hands and doesn't necessarily have the ability to paint with the best of them, I think these are a really good start to a painting project. The more I think about it, the more I don't really want to rely on them, full stop. I think they're used at their best to get a model 50% or so of the way there. Really, they're a method of us supplementing our own creativity, of giving us a canvas to work off. And then I suppose the job of the person painting it is really to sort of pick out those details or do some interesting things on top. I mean, while I've been talking, you're seeing sort of, I guess a little bit of a time lapse of me picking out some final details and then doing a bit of a highlight stage. These contrasts presented a brilliant start for these models. They gave me the base that I really wanted. They gave me that kind of visual interest I keep talking about, where suddenly the bone looked like a bone, suddenly the green skin of the little goblin thing looked like green skin, suddenly the armor looked tainted and kind of blue and interesting and a bit Zinchi perhaps. These are a really, really fun start. I think for myself, someone with a painter who gets migraines, who has to wear glasses to see things close up, and also doesn't have the steadiest hands, the way that I'm going to be using these contrast paints going forwards is that they are my start. Once I've primed, once I've done the dry brushing stages, this will be my start of the process. My moment at which I'm picking out my main colours, I'm getting them on the model rather than traditional basing. I think the thing that I'll want to think about in the future is how to push those darks and how to push those lights in more of a contrasty, pardon the pun, direction from each other. You can see that these guys have all just been painted in a different style from each other. They look adorable in real life. They are so small. I mean, they're on those absolutely miniature GW bases, and on top of that they still look quite dwarfed by those bases. They're really cute. I thought I liked them when they were grey, but my god, when they've had some colour on them, they are just brilliant. They, as well as being my little contrast experiment, because something like this would be intimidating as all hell to me normally, as someone without the steadiest hands, they've also become a nice little test for my army painter brushes. I was going to talk about these brushes a little bit in this video, but given I wanted to talk a little bit about Geek Gaming Scenics, I've sort of decided not to. I'll just sum up and say the dry brush was used in the last video, it was okay. I think I would buy another dry brush. The detail in the larger brush are what I've used throughout this video. They've not stayed together as much as I would have wanted, but I really like the painting handles, so I might invest in some brushes that have nicer, steadier handles for future use. Anyway, let's get on to the important stuff. Basing. Something that I've been burnt on in the past is just putting basing products down on black bases, but sometimes these basing products, they dry in slightly weird ways, or while you're working with them they can kind of pull away from the edges and stuff like that, and you've either got to go in later and fix them, you've got to go over the top in some kind of way that makes them work, or you've just got to live with it. I'm not doing that, so there's a very dark brown, just in case the coverage wasn't the best. I thought this was probably a bit OTT, if I'm honest, but I'm just admitting to it nonetheless. So to base, I'm using this Geek Gaming range stuff. I bought some tufts, never used tufts before. Some of the base ready range and some basing glue. This is my moment of, I don't know, what would you call it? Male adult self-doubt. When I realised that I genuinely do not own tweezers. Seems like one of those things I should own, but I do not. So, in a moment of, I'm presuming, testosterone-based stupidity, I thought, well, if I don't have tweezers, I'm sure my Leatherman will do. This went about as well as you could expect. The Leatherman pulled them just straight back off again. There was no way to get them down stably. And I discovered that the glue underneath the tuft is not quite the strongest in the world. I suspect this is by design, so you can move stuff about and replace it. But I was sort of expecting from the tackiness that you would just sort of place and it would stay. As that wasn't the case, I took out the glue that I'd bought from them and I just put a little bit in my dry palette. This is just a dirt cheap one off Amazon. Put a little bit in there, got a brush that I absolutely can't stick and have used for basing stuff before, and just very lightly covered all of the bases in this stuff. and then basically placed the tufts into that glue mixture sat on top of the base. This is locked down completely. It's immovable in the finished result, so I'm really happy with that. And then while that glue was still wet, I basically just dropped these guys into the little pot of base ready stuff, and it just worked perfectly. There's a couple of places where, because I wasn't the steadiest when I was applying the glue, where some of the items just went, well, some of the little bits of dirt just went slightly over the edge. That was a little bit hard to wipe away, but honestly, this works a treat. I am in love with this stuff. It's amazing. The effect's really cool. I think because the tufts look quite large, they do a lot to make these 4 little guys look really small. You know, the tufts look like tufts of grass that these guys are sort of, you know, that's coming up halfway up them or something, and I think that's really, really cool. Ever since I've done this, I've been thinking non-stop about armies, projects like that, and maybe considering picking something that I could use this for. I've been thinking about an army for a little while. It may or may not wear power armor, and I think this stuff would just be an absolute dream for that. So I'm probably going to nip back into Newcastle and buy absolutely metric tons of it, because it's really, really good. Yeah, as this video comes to a close, I have to say I absolutely loved this process. The contrast is clearly a beginning, but with some minor additions and amends, I think it looks really good. Gets you 50% of the way there, and to be honest, this Geek Gaming stuff gets you a decent chunk of the rest of the way. I was hoping, admittedly, just thinking about the contrast, that some of the stuff that I struggle with, highlighting for example, could be taken care of, but I'm really happy with these new tools. They will probably be getting use, and I have to say that this Geek Gaming stuff has absolutely blown me away. So yeah, I think I will be using a hell of a lot more of them. Admittedly, I've already planned another video with another range of basing products in it. I'll still do that, because that will fit the Necrons that we've already been working on. But I want an army that can use this stuff. And yeah, that's the next step for me, I think. Anyway, I really enjoyed this. This is such a nice little project to have taken up. And these guys, if they're not already, will probably end up being my YouTube banner, I think. And they'll probably live there for time immemorial, or at least that's how it feels right now. They will probably be coming back. I think they're just absolutely superb. I've got a lot out of this process, and yeah, I hope you've enjoyed. So thanks for watching. It's been a pleasure as always. This has been Painting by Letters. My name's Hannes, and keep safe out there.